Welcome to Attic Raiders Retro Reviews, where today we're going to be trying to keep well balanced while we take a look at the board game YALi. Released in 1996 by Jumbo, YALi is an abstract strategy game for 2 players. It is the game that keeps you on the ball, and this is one that employs physics. I really love games where you actually use scientific principles and things where you have to balance things and use gravity, anything like that I really enjoy. So this has got a nice gimmick to it, or at least one that is interesting and captured my attention straight away. Now, as far as box art goes, this thing is pretty mundane. I really am not a fan of the box art on this at all. We've got basically a photograph of the game, and that's kind of it. We've got the font in gold and silver, which mimics the gold and silver of the ball bearings in here, but again, it's not really very interesting. It kind of looks like 90s clip art. And the name YALi really has me confused. I have no idea why this game is called YALi or what YALi means. I've looked it up on the internet. The closest that I can find that it might be is that YALi means pressure in Chinese, and I suppose balance, pressure, the pressure of the ball bearings on the board causing it to tip. It's a possible link, but probably not, because this game is actually from Amsterdam. And the fact that Y, A and L are capital letters and I is lowercase makes me think that perhaps it's an abbreviation, it stands for something. I don't know, it's a bit of a mystery, I ain't got a clue. If you do know though, leave me a note in the comments below. I would love to actually solve this one and find out what YALi is all about. Where's the name from? As far as the box goes, again, on the back, it's not really an awful lot better. We've got more photographs of the board, we've got instructions, and one of the things that is missing is that there seems to be a distinct lack of children playing this game. Something which I'm always keen on 90s board games. To be honest, they probably couldn't actually find any children to play this. Bit of a spoiler, not that keen on this game, but I'll explain more about that later on. Just now, let's take a closer look at the components and then how you play it. The game comes with 12 silver ball bearings and 12 gold ball bearings, and these things really have quite some heft and weight to them. Now, one of the problems with this game, however, is that although silver and gold look quite different, when you actually mix them together, if you are playing in a low light condition, like in your living room at night with just a bulb on, then it really starts becoming quite difficult to be able to tell which are your pieces and which are the opposite player's pieces. So more of a difference in colour between these would have been great benefit. And we have a grey plastic board. There's not a lot to be said for it. It's very abstract here and just really functional. It reminds me a lot of the aircraft carriers from the Battleships game, if one of those was scaled up really big. This is plastic, is in 2 pieces, so that the piece on the bottom, the second piece, can come out, and you can store all of your ball bearings in the bottom of there so none of them get lost. When the ball bearings have been removed from this bottom section and it is flat on the playing surface, it's obviously got this kind of seesaw rocking action with these rubberized stoppers on the bottom here, and you can see the pivot point here on the bottom of it is quite wide at the base here, so it will move from side to side, but it will also balance exactly on the middle there. In order to set up the game, each player puts 8 of their ball bearings in the rectangle on their side of the board. They then also have another 4 ball bearings which go along the side here, and the opposite player has their 4 that go along the side here. And with that set up, we're ready to begin. The winner then is the first player to get the 8 of their coloured ball bearings from inside their starting rectangle across the board into the finishing rectangle on the other side. These ball bearings at the side do not have to be moved across the board in order to win, but by moving them you can get the balance to move in your favour in order to help you out. The first player who's starting the game will take any of their ball bearings and will move forward one space. Now throughout this game you can move your pieces forward or you can move your pieces diagonally forward. The only thing is you cannot move to the sides and you cannot at any point move backwards in any way. You can only keep going forward diagonally or straight ahead. Each time you move a piece, as long as the board stays central or on your side, then you can keep moving as much as you want. So it doesn't really matter where you go just now, you can keep moving and you can keep going until the board changes. At the point where the board tips onto the other side towards the other player, that's when your go is over and it's then their go. Players can move forward as much as they want, and as long as the board doesn't move, can just keep going. If there's one here, they can jump over it. And this is actually a really good way of moving quickly across the board. For example, I can jump over my own playing pieces, and then if I do that, I can kind of use it as a train. Now, if it moves like that so that it goes from tipping towards me to tipping so that it is level, it's still my go. I keep going until it stops. It's only when it moves towards the other player that I have to stop moving, and then it's the other person. You can only jump over one ball bearing at a time. So in this case, the silver cannot jump over these two gold. So it is stuck at the moment there, unless I move diagonally to here, and then it could keep moving. You can have lots of different tactics here. Obviously, you're trying to get all of your pieces to the other side, so you might want to try and advance all of them as much as possible, or you might want to try and keep these ones back here in order to keep as much weight back here as possible to get some of them to the other side. Because as soon as you do get one of your playing pieces to the other side, see if we can do this without it tipping, it's close. As soon as you get one of your pieces into the end rectangle where you're headed for, you then get to move one of your pieces down the side. So here I can move this one towards me, I can move it one space on each of my turns. And now the point of that is that really the more pieces that you get into this end zone over here, the more of these ones down the side you get to move over to your side, which gives you extra weight over here so that you are going to be able to get more of your pieces over there without it tipping onto your opponent's side. Now, one of the things you might notice is that when I'm playing this game, I'm using my finger in order to hold the board still while I pick ball bearings up and move them, and that is entirely legal. You are allowed to do that. It is within the rules. Now, the reason for that is it only counts if it moves onto the other player's side while all your ball bearings are on the board. If you are moving a ball bearing and you pick it up and the board moves before you place the ball bearing down, then that does not actually count as the other person's turn. That is why you've got to hold the board and then move it. And it's only once the ball bearing is down in place that if it moves, then it's the other person's go. As soon as a player moves their last ball bearing, into their end goal rectangle, then they are the winner. Of course, that's just the basic rules. According to the instructions, if you're using the basic rules, then there's actually a strategy that will let you win every single time. Now, they say that they won't give away what that strategy is because it would spoil the challenge of discovering it yourself. The thing is, since this game came out in 1996, nobody seems to have actually discovered what that winning strategy is. There's a couple of threads on Board Game Geek asking about what it might be, but nobody seems to have actually worked it out. And there doesn't seem to be any information on the internet anyway about what that winning strategy is. However, when you do discover what that winning strategy is, you can then use the advanced play rules, which, according to the instructions, then mean that YALi becomes even more strategic and thrilling. To play an advanced game, the board setup is the same, except that each player has one less ball bearing. And then the difference is, instead of having to get your ball bearing all the way across the board and into your end zone in order to be able to move these ball bearings down the side, you do instead get to move one of these ones down the side every time that you jump over an opponent's ball bearing. You jump over it, then you get to move one. And that means you're going to have much more weight at your side and you're going to have much more of an advantage. So it means that players are going to have to be careful as they're moving across the board to try and not leave spaces where other player can jump over them because they don't want them to have that advantage. One way that you might be able to do that, for instance, is by having two next to each other so that the other player can't jump over two and have the advantage of being able to move a ball bearing closer to themselves. With the advanced rules, if you get to the point where you've managed to move all of your three ball bearings down the side onto your side, then depending on how the other player has done, you can then, once you've moved all of them onto your side, you can then start moving the other player's ball bearings back onto your side as well. So eventually you might end up with the 6 ball bearings down the side on your side, giving you a huge tactical advantage. To be perfectly honest, I'm not entirely sure how much of a difference the advanced version does make, because I have never figured out what the basic winning strategy is, so I've never actually played this game in advanced mode. It might make a huge difference to the game, but as far as gameplay and enjoyability of this goes, for me, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference. So, what do I actually think of this game? Well, it's a bit of a strange one. I really do like the fact that it has a tipping point and it uses balance, and that is part of the game mechanic. It's quite unique, it's not something I've seen before, and I do like that it uses that scientific principle. As I mentioned before, the coloration of the balls is a little bit hard to pick out which are yours and which are your opponents, so that's something which I would definitely change straight away. The main problem for me though with this game is that for an abstract strategy game, I just don't really see where the strategy comes in. There's definitely strategy about which balls you move, how far you move them, whether you keep some of the weight back on your side and only advance single ones, or whether you try to advance lots all at once, but it's then going to tip more. But this game just kind of feels like you're playing the board itself rather than your opponent. It feels like both players are playing a solo game. It doesn't feel like they're playing against each other. There's no way of trapping your opponent or hindering them, really. Every move that you make is really all about how you can do better yourself against the balance of the board there. You don't really move things in order to make life more difficult for your opposition. So in that sense, It really is like two people playing two separate games on the same board. It's more like a meditative device rather than a competitive game. In that way, it's interesting, it's quite enjoyable in order to move the balls and to see what kind of strategies work best against the balance of the board, but it really doesn't feel competitive. And in fact, really, it just reminds me more of an executive desktop toy from the 90s rather than an actual game. I've played this game a few times with a few different people, and every time is the same. It doesn't really feel like you're beating the other person, even when you win. So for me, it's not something that I particularly enjoy. You might like it, you might find that it's quite zen moving those balls across the board and finding the tipping points, but for me, I like to be able to really stick it to the other person and really have them annoyed when I beat them. And with this game, that really doesn't happen. I just don't feel any tension with this game, and for a good competitive game, I think you really need that. So, as far as recommendations go, for me, I would leave this one if I saw it. It's not a recommendation for this one, but it is an interesting curio. Well, that's it. There will be plenty more games that I do recommend in future, but until then, this is Attic Raiders Retro Reviews.